Apple introduced the MacBook Neo with a single promise that immediately shifted the conversation around cheap laptops. A genuine MacBook starting at $599. For students, families, first-time Mac owners, and anyone who wanted Apple's software without paying MacBook Air prices, that number was the whole story. It made the Neo feel less like just another premium Apple release and more like a direct strike against budget Windows laptops and Chromebooks. But only months later, the $599 price tag is already gone. The current model now starts higher, and new reports suggest the next version could become more capable while drifting even further from the bargain that made it famous. That's a strange spot to be in. Apple may be preparing a second-generation MacBook Neo built around an A19 Pro chip and 12 gigabytes of unified memory, replacing today's A18 Pro and 8 gigabytes. On paper, that's exactly the upgrade buyers have been asking for. 12 gigabytes would give the laptop more headroom for multitasking, modern apps, browsers loaded with tabs, creative software, and future versions of macOS. Yet the same reports warn that Apple could kill off the cheapest 256 gigabyte configuration. If that happens, the Neo may turn into a better computer while becoming a worse deal for the exact people it was built to reach. To understand why this matters, it helps to remember how unusual the first MacBook Neo really was. Apple had spent years pushing its laptop lineup upmarket. The MacBook Air kept getting faster, more premium, and pricier, while the MacBook Pro pushed deeper into professional territory. Refurbished and older models covered some of the affordable space, but Apple hadn't offered a genuinely new Mac at the price of an ordinary mid-range Windows notebook. The Neo changed that. It showed up with an aluminum body, a sharp 13-inch display, long battery life, macOS, and an Apple-designed chip, all at a launch price that looked almost un-Apple. The compromises were real, but they were deliberate. The current Neo runs the A18 Pro, a chip built for iPhones rather than the M-series processors found in Macs. It comes with 8 gigabytes of unified memory, a 256 gigabyte base drive, 2 USB-C ports running at different speeds, no Thunderbolt, no MagSafe, and a simpler keyboard on the entry model. It isn't a MacBook Air in disguise. It's a separate machine built on the idea that plenty of buyers don't need pro-level ports, huge storage, or workstation performance. They need something reliable for school, documents, browsing, streaming, calls, and light creative work. That approach worked because the price justified the trade-offs. At $599, 8 gigabytes felt tight but forgivable. A 256 gigabyte drive felt small but workable for anyone leaning on cloud storage. The missing premium features were easy to accept because Apple was delivering a modern Mac experience close to the cost of a plastic Windows laptop. Even people who disliked the compromises had to admit Apple had built something genuinely new. The Neo wasn't trying to beat the best laptops on the market, it was trying to win over buyers who'd always assumed a new Mac was out of reach. Then the math changed. Apple's US store now lists the MacBook Neo starting at $699, SAMs, a full $100 above launch. The 512 gigabyte version sits even higher. That doesn't automatically make the Neo a bad deal, but it changes how it feels. $600 reads as an aggressive budget price. $700 starts overlapping with discounted MacBook Airs, stronger Windows Ultrabooks, and machines offering more memory or storage for similar money. Once the Neo crosses into that zone, every compromise gets scrutinized harder and every upgrade matters more. That's why the rumored jump to 12 gigabytes is significant. Memory isn't just a spec sheet number. It shapes how comfortably a machine juggles open apps, how often data gets shuffled to slower storage, and how gracefully the laptop ages as software demands grow. 8 gigabytes can still cover the basics, especially on an efficient OS, but the margin is thin. A browser, messaging app, video call, music, background syncing, and a few services running quietly can eat through that space fast. The computer keeps working, but there's less room to grow into. 12 gigabytes wouldn't turn the Neo into a workstation, but it would make it a far easier machine to recommend. It could ease memory pressure during ordinary multitasking and give buyers more confidence the laptop holds up for years. For students juggling research tabs, documents, slides, and video calls at once, that gap could matter a lot. For families buying a single machine meant to last through school, Extra memory might count for more than a small bump in processor speed. It would fix the most common complaint about the current Neo without shoving the product into MacBook Air territory. The A19 Pro should help balance things too. Apple's A-series chips are built for efficiency, and reusing an iPhone-class processor lets the company build a thin, quiet, affordable laptop without engineering a separate entry-level Mac chip from scratch. The current A18 Pro already handles everyday computing well. A newer A19 Pro should push performance and efficiency further, though the exact Mac configuration hasn't been confirmed. What matters more is that chip and memory move together here. A reported processor bump paired with 12 gigabytes gives Apple a clean way to upgrade the Neo without reinventing it. But better hardware costs more, and the broader industry is under pressure across memory and storage supply. RAM and NAND flash go into phones, laptops, servers, consoles, vehicles, and data centers alike. When demand outpaces production, component costs climb and availability tightens. Apple has huge purchasing power, deep supplier relationships, and negotiating leverage almost no other consumer company can match. But even Apple can't fully dodge a market where key components keep getting pricier. Apple has already shown it will shift prices and configurations when costs move against it. The Neo's launch price is gone. Other products have quietly lost cheaper tiers or crept upward too. That lends weight to the idea that Apple could drop the 256GB Neo entirely and make 512GB the new floor. From Apple's side, that move could simplify production, boost the product's usefulness, and protect margins. From a buyer's side, it could sever the last real link to the Neo's original promise of a genuinely cheap MacBook. There's a real difference between value and affordability. A 12GB Neo with 512GB might well be the better value versus today's base model, especially with a faster chip and Touch ID on the keyboard, more memory, more storage, likely longer usable life. But if the starting price climbs to $799 or beyond, the machine becomes less affordable no matter how much extra hardware you're getting for each dollar. A shopper with a hard $600 ceiling can't take advantage of a better deal that costs $200 more than they have. That's the risk for Apple. The Neo generated buzz because it opened the Mac ecosystem to people who'd always assumed they were priced out. Keep upgrading the product while steadily pushing the entry price higher, and Apple risks turning the Neo into just another mid-range laptop instead of a genuine gateway into the Mac world. The company already has the MacBook Air for buyers who want a nicer display, faster ports, an M-series chip, MagSafe, and a more polished overall package. The Neo only earns its place if there's real distance between the two products. At $599, that gap was obvious. At $699, it's already narrower. If the next Neo starts at $799, shoppers will be comparing it head-to-head with discounted or previous Gen Airs. Retailers regularly mark down older Apple laptops, and those sales can create awkward moments where a far more capable Air costs almost the same as the newer budget machine. Apple controls its own pricing, but it can't control every retailer's discount. The higher the Neo climbs, the harder it gets to explain why someone shouldn't just wait for an Air deal instead. Windows competition gets tougher at higher prices too. Around $600, a lot of laptops lean on plastic builds, mediocre screens, weak battery life, or flaky trackpads, which is exactly where the Neo's aluminum body, efficient chip, and polished software stand out. Around $800 though, buyers start finding Windows machines with 16 gigabytes of memory, 512 gigabytes or more of storage, OLED displays, touchscreens, faster ports, and broader compatibility with games and specialized software. Apple's ecosystem still has pull, but the hardware comparison gets a lot less forgiving. The education market matters a great deal here. Apple has built loyalty for years by reaching students early. A low-cost MacBook can be someone's first taste of macOS, iCloud, Apple's services, and the tight link between a Mac and an iPhone. A relationship that can later turn into a pricier laptop, phone, watch, or subscription down the road. The Neo isn't just a low-margin device, it's an entry point into something bigger. Raising the price protects per-unit profit, but shrinks the pool of new customers stepping into that ecosystem. Schools and parents also think differently than enthusiasts do. They're usually working with fixed budgets, and they care about durability, battery life, and whether the machine will survive several years of use. 12 gigabytes of memory and 512 gigabytes of storage would genuinely improve longevity, but only if the price stays within reach. A school buying hundreds of units feels every $100 hike. A parent buying 2 laptops for their kids feels it twice over. Apple has to decide whether the Neo exists to maximize specs or to maximize access. There may be a separate reason to drop the 256 gigabyte tier. Storage needs keep growing. Apps, photos, videos, offline media, and system files all expand over time, and a 256 gigabyte drive can fill up fast, especially once you account for space reserved for the OS and temporary files. Apple may simply believe 512 gigabytes delivers a better experience and cuts down on complaints. It also lets the company frame the new model as a real upgrade rather than a minor chip refresh. Still, Apple has used storage tiers strategically for years. A low starting price grabs attention, and plenty of buyers end up stepping up a tier once they see the base model's limits. The cheapest configuration acts as the headline even when the next tier up is the more practical purchase. Cutting that entry tier means giving up a powerful marketing hook. MacBook from $599 reached people who normally tune out Apple laptop announcements. MacBook from $799 sounds far more ordinary, even if the machine behind it is meaningfully better. Apple could split the difference. It could keep a lower capacity option around for schools, hold the current model at a reduced price, or sell the new 12 gigabyte version above an older 8 gigabyte model that sticks around. Apple has used previous generation devices to anchor lower price points before, and that approach would protect the affordable entry point while letting the next Neo get more capable. The trade-off is that running multiple generations at once complicates the lineup and works against the simplicity Apple usually prefers. There's also a chance Apple eats some of the cost to defend the category. The company doesn't just make money on hardware, it profits from services and ecosystem loyalty too. A cheaper MacBook can drive future App Store spending, iCloud subscriptions, Apple Music memberships, accessories, and future upgrades. Apple may decide keeping the Neo accessible is worth more strategically than squeezing maximum margin out of it. That said, the price increase we've already seen suggests there's a limit to how much pressure the company is willing to absorb. It's worth remembering the second-generation Neo is still a rumor, not an announcement. Apple hasn't confirmed the A19 Pro, the 12 gigabytes memory bump, new colors, dropping the 256 gigabytes tier, or any final pricing. Plans can shift before launch. Different prototypes get tested, supply conditions can improve, and Apple could land on a configuration nobody's reported yet. The safest takeaway isn't that a specific price hike is locked in. It's that the original $599 idea is already under strain. That strain says something bigger about affordable tech in general. Companies can launch aggressive products when component costs, supply deals, and strategy all line up. Holding on to those prices afterward is much harder than hitting them once. Memory and storage markets move in cycles, currencies fluctuate, and shipping, manufacturing, and tariffs all pile onto costs. A laptop built as a breakthrough bargain can become surprisingly hard to sustain. Apple's real challenge is holding on to the feeling of accessibility even after the economics that made it possible stop cooperating. The Neo also tests how much buyers actually value the Apple experience on its own terms. Some will happily accept less memory, fewer ports, and smaller storage for macOS, battery efficiency, build quality, and tight iPhone integration. Others will compare specs line by line and pick a Windows machine with more hardware for the money. At $599, Apple could win both the emotional argument and the practical one. At a higher price, the emotional pull sticks around, but the practical case gets a lot messier. For people who already own a Neo, a rumored upgrade shouldn't make the current machine obsolete overnight. The A18 Pro model still does exactly what it was built to do. Anyone who bought it at the original price locked in one of Apple's most aggressive laptop deals in years. The next model might be faster and more future-proof, but if it costs enough more, it could end up making the first generation look even smarter in hindsight. Sometimes the better value isn't the newest product, it's the one you bought before the market shifted. For anyone still shopping, the timing is genuinely tricky. Buying the current Neo now means paying above launch price for 8 gigabytes and 256 gigabytes. Waiting could bring 12 gigabytes and a stronger chip, possibly at a higher starting price. A discounted MacBook Air might offer stronger overall hardware, but not always for the same money. There's no single right answer. It comes down to budget, urgency, storage needs, and how long you plan to keep the machine. Whatever Apple decides will reveal what it actually believes the Neo is for. If it's meant to be a volume product, Apple needs to protect a low entry price. If it's really a vehicle for introducing cheaper Apple silicon without undercutting the Air, then upgrades and price hikes become easier to justify. Buyers are about to find out whether affordability was the Neo's permanent foundation or just the headline that launched Generation 1. My take: Apple should treat affordability as the Neo's defining trait, not just its launch day pitch. 12 gigabytes of memory is the right upgrade, and 512 gigabytes would make the machine noticeably more comfortable to use. But Apple shouldn't let those improvements push the entry price too close to the MacBook Air. The smartest play would be keeping a genuinely affordable model on the shelf, even if that means letting the current generation run alongside the new one. The Neo works when it puts a good Mac in more people's hands, not when it turns into just another expensive laptop with better specs. So, what would you pick? A cheaper MacBook Neo with 8 gigabytes and 256 gigabytes, or paying more for 12 gigabytes and 512 gigabytes? At what price does the Neo stop feeling affordable to you? $699, $799, or somewhere higher? Drop your take in the comments. And for more clear-eyed coverage of Apple chips, memory, laptops, and the tech reshaping what consumers pay, subscribe to Eastern Engine.